Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Got a lot to talk about today. A lot of rumors starting to swirl regarding the New York Giants, mainly some players that are currently on the team and a former New York Giant. Of course, you know, Odell Beckham. You've heard the rumors. I'll give my whole opinion on that. Today, the New York Giants were I think it was in Arizona. We'll see in a second when I pull up the quote later. But I think it was in Arizona today that he had a private workout. I think there was 11 teams in attendance there. One team that was notably absent was actually the team that a lot of people had as the favorite to land him in midseason when you remember the visit, which included the New York Giants, and that was the Dallas Cowboys. They were not there today. There were 11 teams. We'll go over all the 11 teams, but the Giants were one of them. We'll also talk about who was there representing the New York Giants. In addition to that, we'll touch on some news regarding Julian Love, a player who I've kind of cooled off on in terms of him coming back with the Giants. But if the market is right, sure, I'd love to have him back. He's a leader. He's a leader in the locker room. He's a good football player, and he played relatively well last year for the Giants. I think it all depends on price, at least for me. Also, a rumor, at least according to Pat Leonard, that the Giants could potentially be interested in Gabe Davis. I'll touch on that. But we're going to start with the biggest news of the day in the NFL. There was a huge blockbuster, monster trade, if you've been living under a rock, that went down today. The first overall pick is off the board. It's traded. The Carolina Panthers jumped from 9-1 to go up and get their future Cam Newton. I'll give my full opinion on the trade. I'll also talk about it from a New York Giants fan's perspective, because that's what I always like to do in terms of how glad I am that the Giants elected to bring back Daniel Jones. But first, let's touch on the trade. Let's talk about that before we get into the bulk of the video with the New York Giants. Had to talk about it today. Huge trade. Doesn't really impact the Giants. Giants, of course, picking much later in the draft this year at 25. However, I think if you're an Arizona Cardinal fan, you should be thrilled. I think the first 4 picks in this year's draft right now are shooting up to be quarterbacks at this point after this trade, because you figure the Panthers are obviously going to take a quarterback. At number 2, Houston, you got to think is going to take a quarterback. And now the Arizona Cardinals have so much value with that pick at number 3, with so many quarterback-hungry teams looking for the third overall, quarterback prospect in this year's draft, like the Raiders, possibly the Seahawks. A lot of teams could still potentially trade up into that spot. Hell, even Washington, if they really liked one of these quarterbacks, could, give up a big deal to be able to go up and get him at number 3. So I got to think Arizona eventually probably trades out of that pick as well. And I think it's at least trending that 4 quarterbacks are going to go in the first 4 picks in this year's draft, with the Colts picking at 4th overall. But that remains to be seen. But a huge trade in the NFL world today. The number 1 overall pick was traded from the Chicago Bears to the Carolina Panthers. And you got to figure the Panthers, and we'll talk, a little bit more about this trade in a second. Just want to show my face as I talk, and then we'll pull it back up. But you got to figure the Panthers here are going to go up and they're going to get C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, or Anthony Richardson, who really impressed at the combine. People were raving about his record-breaking performance, so maybe they'll go for the fences there with that pick. But what did they give up? They gave up 2 first-round picks, so a pick swap, gave up 9 for 1, an additional first-round pick in the 2024 draft, 2 second-round picks, 1 in this year's draft, 1 in the 2025 draft, and DJ Moore. Now, they did make the trade in season last year, in which they gave up Christian McCaffrey, so they had a little extra draft capital. I don't remember exactly what they got, but they certainly got some good, a good amount of picks in that trade, so maybe they felt like they could afford to give up some picks. Maybe they planned to do this all along, which is why they were willing to give up McCaffrey to get that extra draft capital, to be able to make a move like this, to get the quarterback of the future for their football team. But if you're a Bears fan, I think you got to be happy. The option for the Bears was either stick, with the quarterback that they have right now, or in Justin Fields, or trade him to another team for a first-round pick and select a quarterback at 1st overall. Obviously, their general manager polls here is showing a lot of confidence in the young quarterback in Justin Fields. He had an opportunity to take any quarterback that he wanted in this draft. He didn't draft Justin Fields, much like Joe Shane not drafting Daniel Jones, and he elected to stick with him year 3. He got him a weapon last year. We all remember when he traded for Chase Claypool. Now he brings in another weapon in this trade by getting DJ Moore, who I think would have garnished the first-round pick. When you look at what some of these other wide receivers get in past trades. So for me, I look at this as if they gave up 3 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks to move up to number 1. That's at least the way I look at it. We saw what A.J. Brown got. We've seen what Stephon Diggs has gotten. Chase Claypool basically got a first-round pick from the Chicago Bears. So I think they probably could have got a first-round pick for him. So they gave up a ton to go up and get the quarterback of the future for them. But if it works out, obviously, it'll be well worth it. But a lot of pressure now on whichever quarterback lands in Carolina with that first overall pick. You got to figure, the expectations are going to be sky high, especially after a move like that. But they're looking for the guy to replace Cam Newton. Who's the guy that reminds you most of Cam Newton in this year's draft? I'd probably say Anthony Richardson, but it's a new general manager, so I don't know how much that means. I'm still leaning it'll probably be C.J. Stroud. Could certainly be Young, and I suppose Anthony Richardson certainly has a chance to be that pick as well. From a Giants fan's perspective, this cements home. It drives home the point that Joe Schoen absolutely made the right decision to stick with Daniel Jones. Now, you want to argue maybe they should have franchise tagged him at this point when you see the contract. I don't even know if you can necessarily argue that. But you certainly can't argue at this point that they should have traded up to get a quarterback, because now that fantasy that one of these quarterbacks could have fallen out of the top 7 or 9, that's over. First 3 picks are going to be quarterbacks. That's as clear as day now. Obviously, Carolina didn't trade up not to take a quarterback. Obviously, Houston's going to take a quarterback. And you got to figure Arizona's probably going to trade out of that pick. So if the Giants wanted to trade up and get a quarterback at this point, had they not stuck with Jones, you would have to give up probably 4 first-round picks to go up to number 3 overall for the 3rd quarterback taken in the draft. So in the end, as a Giants fan, I am thrilled that we elected to stick with Daniel Jones and not go the draft route. So I think things worked out perfectly there for the New York Giants, and Daniel Jones continue to build that team over the next 2 years and see where he is in 2025. And then you reassess the roster as Joe Schoen continues to build this team up over the next 2 drafts. But a blockbuster trade, one of the biggest trades in recent memory, pre-draft, right? Trading the first overall pick 2 months before the draft. But a big trade today went down in the NFL. Now I want to touch on the Julian Love news. This came out from Pro Football Talk, and a couple of other people touched on it as well. But we'll read this quote. Julian Love, at least sounds like, stands a decent chance to come back with the New York Giants, and maybe his market's going to be a bit lower than I initially anticipated. Safety Julian Love said Friday on Sirius XM NFL Radio that things have ramped up in contract talks with the New York Giants since the team signed Daniel Jones and franchise tag Saquon Barkley earlier this week. And that would only make sense. You figure that the New York Giants would prioritize their 3rd biggest pending free agent, that, of course, being Julian Love, after they got, Saquon tagged and Daniel Jones extended. Love can be a free agent if he does not sign a new contract with the Giants in the coming days. The free agent negotiating window opens on Monday, March 13th. So coming up real soon, guys, 3 days. The signing period begins on Wednesday, March 15th. I'll probably go live Monday after work. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of rumors and signings, so we'll certainly talk about that. That'll be a busy day on the channel. Looking forward to that. They've, meaning the Giants, constantly expressed interest. Love told Bruce Murray and Mark Dominic. Since the end of the season, they've reiterated the interest to bring me back. I reiterated that I want to be back. Hopefully, if we can meet on the price. Julian Love talking about the New York Giants, and obviously he's asking for a bit more than Joe Schoen wants to give. They continue to negotiate. My happy place if I'm Joe Schoen is probably nothing above $7 million, nothing above a 2-year commitment. If it's approaching $10 million, I steer clear of that. Would I be okay with 8? Yeah. I prefer like 6 or 7, but we'll see what his market ultimately ends up being. Then it later went on to say this. There's a sense of wanting to finish the job with the team that drafted you. But at the same time, you can't just settle, Love said. A football career is so short that you have to get what you feel is fair while you're in it. I'm human. Money is a huge part of the equation, but it's not the end-all be-all. It's a huge point, but the feel has to be right. If you don't believe in the organization and the ability to grow going forward, that says it all. There's that balance. Love said it was a no-brainer for the Giants to bring Jones and Barkley back. You've got to reward the guys that do well by you. Daniel this year, he played well. He got us to the playoffs. He managed games well. Quarterbacks don't grow on trees. You've just got to put weapons around him. We've got to build the interior. Notice how he says we've got to weave, as if the New York Giants. We've got to build the interior line more. We have good young tackles, and we've got to bring receivers in. Still saying we, still referring to himself as a Giant, even though he's a free agent. So maybe he's tipping his hand there that he expects to be back with the Giants. We'll see. I mean, I'd like to have Love back, but the deal has to be, manageable. I don't think the New York Giants should break the bank for Julian Love, especially being that they have to pay McKinney, more than likely at least, in the near future, being that he's a free agent at the end of the season. But that's a story for another day. We'll talk about that in 2024. But I don't think Joe Schoen's going to give Julian Love a ton of money. they could get him back for that $7 million range, yeah, I think he fits well in Wink's defense. I think he played relatively well last year when given the opportunity. And if you could improve that overall secondary and you have McKinney out there all year, hopefully with an improved cornerback core, yeah, Julian Love should only get better, respected in the locker room, a captain. So I'd like to have him back, but it's got to be the right circumstance. And at least it seems, according to Julian Love, that it's trending that way. So we'll see. Then we're going to talk about the Odell Beckham news. I know there's a big story all over Twitter. Beckham, of course, the former New York Giant, one of the most polarizing players in franchise history, no doubt about it. He was loved and hated by a lot of members of this fan base. This coming out from Jonathan Jones. Teams represented at Odell Beckham Jr.'s private workout in Arizona today included the Panthers, the Giants, the Patriots, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Niners, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Vikings, the Browns, and the Ravens per source. So 11 teams. As I said at the top of the video, the one team that you don't see there that's interesting is you don't see the Dallas Cowboys. We, of course, remember when Odell Beckham went to Dallas last year, went to a Mavericks game, seemed like the Cowboys were a really good fit. They were a team that you thought was at least a potential threat to go to a Super Bowl. They needed a wide receiver. Didn't work out for them. Didn't work out for anybody. Decided to wait till the offseason where it would be a very thin wide receiver class. And he may strike it big, as crazy as that may sound. At his age, coming off 2 ACL tears, it's a very thin wide receiver market. I think the Giants, if they decide to sign Odell Beckham, and maybe they will, it has to be a short commitment and it has to be incentive-based. It's a very risky proposition to commit a lot of years to Odell Beckham. If you're able to get him on like a 2-year commitment that's relatively affordable and it's incentive-based, I'd be interested. I still think he's a guy that definitely possesses talent. He could at least be a wide receiver 2 for a team that desperately needs a wide receiver. And if the contract makes sense, sure. I know a lot of people are going to be scared off by the fact that they worry he could ruin this locker room with his reputation. I would have to hope and think that he'd be a bit mature, but who knows? You'll worry about that if the New York Giants actually sign the guy. I'm sure we're going to get more reports that come out about this, how the workout went. I saw some highlights on Twitter, made a couple of one-handed catches, so that's a big story right now in the NFL. And, of course, the New York Giants naturally are involved in it, especially being that they took him out to dinner. All reports came out in season when Shane and Dable took him out that things went well, and now the Giants are traveling all the way across to Arizona to get a look at the former New York Giant. In terms of the teams that were there, who would I think stands the best chance to land him? I mean, I suppose the Panthers could make sense, especially being that they just traded up to get a rookie quarterback. You'd want to get him help. They just traded away their number one weapon. But would Beckham want to go to a team that, is kind of in rebuild mode at his age? I don't know if that really makes a whole lot of sense, especially a team that's going to be starting a rookie quarterback. The Patriots, again, I don't know if that's a great fit there. They're not really a team that's in win-now mode, in my opinion. I don't think Mac Jones appears to be the guy that's going to get that team over the top, but they do need help at the wide receiver spot. The Rams, of course, his former stop, but now they're 2 years older, coming off a lot of injuries themselves. Maybe he feels like there's some unfinished business. Of course, he fits well with McVay, but Stafford's not getting any younger. Again, I don't know if that's necessarily a great fit. The Cardinals, I don't see being a fit. Kyler Murray's going to miss at least half the season. I don't think that's a place he'd want to go. 49ers could make a lot of sense, but of course, they've got a lot of targets over there, especially when you factor in McCaffrey between Kittle, Ayuk, Debo. I don't know if that's a great fit. The Bills, I think, could make sense for sure. The Chiefs, for sure. They're going to be losing a lot of wide receivers to get a chance to play with Pat Mahomes. That may be the best fit if you're Odell Beckham, if they came calling. The Vikings could be a good fit. Again, I don't really view them as a great team. They seem to be losing a lot of pieces on the defense. The Browns, yes, Deshaun Watson coming back. You get to play opposite Amari Cooper. Could be a fit. And the Ravens, if they were to keep Lamar Jackson, which it appears there's a decent possibility they won't, could make sense as well. So if I'm looking at that list, excluding the Giants, the Ravens, the Browns, the Chiefs, and the Bills, I think would probably make the most sense. And the Giants, I think they would be in the mix, being, that he's from the Giants. He came up with the Giants. He might feel like he has unfinished business. The Giants had a very good year last year. He has friends on the team. We desperately need a wide receiver. It could make sense. I think it would have to be the right deal in the $8 to $10 million range, maybe for a 2-year commitment that's incentive based, where maybe if he eclipses 1,000 yards, he gets a $3 million bonus, something similar to what they did with Daniel Jones. But I don't think you could break the bank for a guy coming off of 2 ACL tears. I think the Giants have to tread carefully, but under the right circumstance, could it make sense? Sure. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, but it's at least more possible than I once thought. We'll see how the story continues to develop. In terms of who was there today for the workout for the New York Giants, this coming out from Kim Jones. The New York Giants, represented by wide receiver coach Mike Groh, and a member of the personnel department at Odell Beckham Jr.'s workout today in Arizona. I'm told OBJ on the comeback trail after two ACL tears in his left knee. So the Giants sent their wide receiver coach there today. They didn't send, Shane or Dable, but their wide receiver coach is there to check out Odell Beckham. And we'll see. I mean, free agency's in 3 days. So it wouldn't shock me if you hear that Odell Beckham signs with the team even before then, being that I think he's eligible too. So maybe he had a great workout and he blows the team away and somebody's willing to give him big bucks. I don't want the Giants to do that. But if it makes sense, he's willing to come back here on a 2-year commitment, relatively affordable salary, where he can maybe make a good amount of money if he hits certain incentives. I'm all about that. The Giants need all the help they could get. If Beckham can help this team kind of be a stopgap option at that wide receiver position for a few years as you tried to build up the young core, and maybe you draft a wide receiver as well, it's at least an option that I think the Giants need to, at least kick the tires on. And I think that's what they're doing. In terms of other potential wide receivers, this coming out from Pat Leonard, take it for what you will. But he talked about a couple of wide receivers that he's hearing that could make sense. Giants are poking around the wide receiver trade market. Not the sexiest of names that he mentioned. The Bills, Gabe Davis. The Rams, Allen Robinson. Eyes on free agent Cole Beasley. Sterling Shepard plans to play again in 2023. Darius Slayton's price expected to be high. Optimism on Julian Love and much more. Okay, so first let's start with Slayton. I don't expect Slayton to be back because of that. It's a very thin wide receiver market. I don't think the Giants are going to be willing to pony up the dough. And I think somebody with Slayton's speed, with his height, even with his drop patterns and the fact that he may not be the most, the best route runner in the NFL, he still has speed. You can't teach speed, and he has some production at the NFL level, and it's a very thin wide receiver class. I think a wide receiver needy team will be willing to throw $8 to $10 million at him, and if that's the case, well, the Giants say sayonara. They get a fifth-round comp pick more than likely in the 2024 draft, and it is what it is. Best of luck to Slayton. Love him, but I don't think the Giants are in a place to give him $8 to $10 million when they could probably replace him with a wide receiver in this year's draft, maybe in the third round or so, that you could find a way to replace Darius Slayton. So I don't expect Slayton back, like Pat Leonard kind of alluded to right there. Optimism on Love, we already talked about. Shepard planning to play in 2023. He's an interesting name, of course, a fan favorite, a guy that's very respected in that locker room. I don't know if he makes the most sense, as my heart is saying, bring him back, bring him back, bring him back. I absolutely love Sterling Shepard, love him to death, and I'll be cheering my ass off for him if he is back with the New York Giants. But generally speaking, the back end of your wide receiving core, you want those guys to be special teams contributors. And we all saw how bad the New York Giants, were in that department last year, right? I think the Giants will probably prioritize their fifth or sixth receiver being a guy that could contribute from within in special teams, if I had to guess at the end of the day. But hey, maybe Shepard will be back. I wouldn't be shocked if he at least gets a camp invite, but I still think it's at least a 50-50 proposition, even if he did, that he would make this team with all the injuries that he sustained over the course of his career. But I'll be rooting my ass off for him. I love Shepard. Eyes on free agent Cole Beasley. Not really interested in that. That doesn't really excite me, if you will. And then at the top, Allen Robinson's kind of had 2 very mediocre years. Gabe Davis is probably the most intriguing option that he mentioned there. Davis, of course, has former ties to the Buffalo Bills with Shane and Dable. You would think he would fit this offense. And we all remember Gabe Davis for having that huge performance in the playoff game with the Buffalo Bills where he caught 4 touchdowns. But he's kind of a hit or miss wide receiver. He's got a very high drop rate as well. He's got upside. He's still relatively young. So I could certainly see the New York Giants at least kicking the tires there if he was available for a fair price. I don't think they're going to go above and beyond, but if they could get him for, say, a third-round pick, maybe the New York Giants would express interest there. He's probably the guy that would most excite me. And you would hope he could be, say, a wide receiver 2 for this team. I certainly don't think any of the guys on that list would be a wide receiver 1, or at least a wide receiver 1 that you would want to be your wide receiver 1 for the New York Giants. Odell Beckham included in that at this point. I view him more as a 2 if the Giants were to bring him in. But certainly an interesting day, in terms of the rumor mill. And you're going to get more and more rumors with the New York Giants as the draft and free agency fast approaches. I'm excited to see how it all plays out. We'll see. Huge trade going down. Beckham, I don't know. Maybe he will be a Giant. I'm going to say no. If I had to pick a team, I don't know. Let's go back to the list. If I had to pick a team for Odell Beckham, I would go with the Chiefs. I'll go with the Chiefs. Andy Reid and the Chiefs, bring them in. They're more than likely going to lose Juju and Hardman. It's a chance to play with Pat Mahomes. I could see it making a lot of sense if they want him. That's just my guess. As far as the trade, huge trade. One of the, blockbuster trade. And Julian Love looks like he may have a better chance of being back with the Giants than I may have thought 2 or 3 weeks ago. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.